Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to 15 to 15.
Yes.
Today's presentation and lesson is on the question, what is tonality in music? And I'm going to make a point about the sound of tonality and try to explain something regarding major and minor keys. And then we would actually do a lesson in making a major scale. How do scales work? And then perhaps, when I've tried to do this in my University of Mary Intro to Music class, I usually felt we needed to practice more, and I don't know if they ever really got it. So 15 minutes is not very long, but we can stop at the point and continue.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to make the point that in Western music, there were many centuries that passed in which a system was developed that we would call tonality. And by the time you get to 1700 with people like Bach, J.S. Bach and Handel, it's been solidified, and one of the terms that's used for it is that it's well-tempered. There's a German word for that, wohltemperierte, meaning, and it has something to do with the invention of this keyboard. But the important thing, and the point that I'm going to really make today, is that tonality has something to do with the sound. That the sound of tonality is different than any other music in the world. And there's a reason that Western music sounds the way it does, and it's based on emotions and the nerves and the way they respond to these chords, basically. So first of all, I'm just going to hit a chord, play a chord here, or arpeggiate it. This is a nice sounding chord. We don't need to know what it's called or how it works, but we can feel it. In a moment, I'm going to shift one key, and it's going to suddenly affect you psychologically. Can you feel that? You can feel it. I'm going to go back. We've got a sound, tension, release. Feel that, regardless of whether it's called a this or a that or a minor or a major or augmented sixth or seventh, it has a psychological impact somehow. Okay, so my first point is that the tonality system has a psychological impact on the listener, and we'll explore that. Now, one of the strange things about this system is that in this system there are actually 12 notes. 12 only. You're used to a pentatonic system that has only 5. That's what pento means. There are only 5 notes. I was only playing 5 notes there. This system has 12, and they have been arranged on the keyboard in a well-tempered way.
What's that mean, well-tempered?
You can just imagine that it's tight, it's very carefully constructed, it's tempered, it's tightened up. It's all based on mathematics and things like that. There's a scientific mathematical quality, but regardless of that, I'm making the point that it has a psychological feeling. I'm going to do that again with the C major chord. Watch, and I'll shift to another chord, but can you feel it? And what we want is a resolution. We can feel it. Can you feel it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some people that couldn't, and they were tone deaf maybe. Oh, no, there's a reason, but you could feel that. It's all based on the nerves responding to those chordal shifts. Okay, so in this system, this well-tempered system of the Western civilization, there are only 12 notes, and they're repeated over and over. And when I should have taken a theory class in college, but this was the book at Bethany College, and there were all these things that I feel like I should learn about, these different kinds of chords, like what is this, what is that, what is it called, and all this kind of stuff. But I didn't. But what I realize now, the whole system of theory that people like Devin studied is just based on the way these 12 notes relate. That's all it is. There's nothing to it, really. I mean, and it's such a small world. Here, look, we'll start with C. And these are our 12 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then back to C. It's repeated over and over and over. Okay. Now, this is based on, the well-tempered system is based on the idea that some of these keys get arranged in a major way, and in others in minor, major, minor, major, minor, major, minor. And they have here's a major C chord, and I'm going to shift it to a C minor. Watch this. You can feel it, can't you? Tension.
Why is one a minor? Just because you use a black key?
It's all about the black keys.
Really?
No, not no. Well, we'll see how that works, and we're going to learn a major scale today, and not a minor scale.
We're at 8 minutes.
8 minutes
so
left.
halfway. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's see. Let's make a major scale. There are 12 notes here, but only 7 of them are used in a major and a minor scale. So here's how a C major would go. That's the only, all of these were left out. However, I could do D major, and I'm going to follow the same system, and it'll sound exactly the same. It's the D major scale. And there are only 7 notes being used. E major.
How do you know those are the right notes?
Because we are going to use this system. This is the part that my students never got. And they should have practiced it over and over. Because I said, on your final, I will be having you make these different keys, and then you'll get certain points. And they admitted they didn't practice that hard.
Did you fail them? Well,
they passed for, they got points off.
They got points off.
Yes, for sure.
Good.
Now, let's take the C major scale. Now, it looks simple enough because we're just on the white keys. However, it's based on intervals. An interval is the space between one note and another note, and steps. We'll call them steps. There's a half step and a whole step. A half step is you go up or down the next note, and then the next one would make it whole, because 2 halves make a whole. Does that make sense to you?
Not really.
See, that's my point.
Let me turn this up. So say it again.
To make a whole step, we have to have 2 half steps. That would make sense, right? 2 half steps.
Yeah.
To make a whole. Now, if I start from here and I go to here, that's a half step. It's only 1. But then if I go here, it's actually 2. So that is, from here to here, it's a whole step.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I guess.
How many is it from here to there?
Half.
That is correct. How many is it from here to here?
1.
Whole. Now
Whole.
here's the thing that makes the well-tempered system so unique. How many is it from here to here?
Uh-oh.
It looks like it should be whole, but it's just a half.
Oh.
See, from this to this makes a whole step.
Weird.
Do you see? That's how this system had to get going.
Really?
It's technical, it's mathematical, it's structural, and yet it has a psychological sound.
So you're just putting stuff together that makes a step?
Well, I'm making chords right then.
Oh,
But I
okay.
know what those chords are going to be. Because my hand knows where they should go, because it's in the muscle memory. So here, if I'm going to make a C major scale, even though they're all white keys, I start with the bass tone, C, and then I go up a whole step, then another whole step, watch this, then I go up a half, then a whole, then a whole, and the whole, and I've still got a half left. See, between here and there, it's a half step. It's only half, it's only one, it's not two. Does that make sense? Not really.
No.
Okay.
Not really.
Well, you're going to be the assign. Okay, so I made a scale. Okay. Now I'm going, this was a C major scale because I started with the bass tone as C. Let's say I'm going to start with the bass tone D.
4 minutes.
Okay, here's my bass tone, D. Then I'm going to go up a whole step, meaning 2 halves. And then I'm going up another whole step. Now there's 2 halves. Then a half.
Hey, dust.
Then I'm going up a whole, and this whole is 2 halves, and then a half. And yet it sounds like a scale. Isn't that nice? Now, if I were giving an assignment, I would say, and this is a major scale, and I'd say, I want you to start with this F and make a F major scale from this bass tone. There it is. And you could figure it out just by following this. So it has to be clear what's a whole step, what's a half step, but there are only 7 notes being played when you're in any one key. Now, as we conclude,
We got like 3 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes and a half.
that's good. By the time you get to Johann Sebastian Bach in 1700s, he is so interested in the well-tempered system of major and minor scales, key signature, keys. He knows there is a C major scale, a C sharp major scale, a D. He knows there's a major scale for every one of these. There are 12. He knows that there are 12 minor scales for each, because there's a C minor, C, E minor, F minor, F. So he writes a group of pieces for the keyboard. It's preludes and fugues. And the first one is in C major. The second one is in C sharp major. He's going to go all 24 because he's having fun with the technicality of it in both the major and minor. So if we just take the famous prelude number 1, we know it's in the key of C major, but he already is playing with the harmony to create tension. Let's see if you recognize this. We're in a key of C, but then he goes, creating tension. He knows that's a release. Back to C major, release. Then he goes, I'm not sure even what to. Now he's in D major. Can you feel it, how it's shifting? Now he really does a fast one here. He wants you to really feel it. Now he's here. He keeps, and when he changes the key like that, it's called modulation, because he's creating a tension. He starts with C major, and at the end, he's coming down to the end. C major. He knows he's gone all the way through this process. with keys, changing, shifting to create that tension, major and minor, and it's all based on these scales in which there are only 7 notes that would make up that scale. And if you were going to study it or work on it, you would say, I'm going to do some major scales, and I can start anywhere I want and go through this pattern, and it will sound exactly right.
So today we're going to be looking at the number 23 and the importance of the number 23 in a lot of different studies, religions, psychologists who've looked at it. When you first see this number, do you feel any association with the number 23? What's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Well, that it's 1 less than 24, which is a more natural number for me, it seems like.
24 seems more natural?
It just, maybe it's because we get A24 movies a lot in Cinema 100. But, okay.
Do you do stuff with numbers in your head ever?
I'm not sure what you mean by numbers, but I suppose,
do you
yes.
kind of like focus on certain numbers as being more important than others?
717.
717 is your birthday.
Yes.
So 24 is 7 plus 17.
Yes, good point. Good point. Yes. See, I never noticed that, but
what are some other numbers you like?
I suppose 7, 4.
Do you like 44?
Yes, I use 44, 7, 17, 44. That's kind of a classic.
Because 44 is one of my numbers, because it's 22 times 2 is 44.
Yes, okay.
Right.
And
as you can see, I'm 22nd, and you previously have had 24. And then the missing one would be 23 in the middle.
Yes, okay.
So we've already
yes,
kind of worked out some 23 stuff just on the fly.
Yes.
So have you ever heard of the 23 Enigma?
I think you mentioned it once, but I can't. I certainly know Robert Wilson and William Burroughs.
So William Burroughs was considered the first person to take note of this thing called the 23 Enigma. And he saw a lot of coincidences and saw that the number 23 had some sort of importance. So when he saw something pop up with the 23rd of the month, or the 23rd boat, or the, whatever, he started kind of collecting all these instances of 23 in his like little scrapbook sort of thing. Here we can see he talks about Burroughs tells the story of meeting a ferry captain named Clark who claimed to have sailed the same route without an incident for 23 years. That very day, however, the ferry sank. Later that day, Burroughs writes, he was thinking about Clark's ferry accident when he heard that a Flight 23 on a New York-Miami route had crashed. According to Burroughs, the pilot's name for the flight had also been Clark. Burroughs began collecting incidences of the number 23 in a scrapbook and referred to them in his writings. So he starts bringing 23 into common use in some ways. If we think about Robert Anton Wilson, I think you're already a pope. That's one of his big things, that you're a pope. And now that you're a pope, you can make anybody else a pope. But Robert Anton Wilson wrote a lot about the number 23 as well. And of course, he was writing these kind of books that were almost parodies of religion. They were partially personal experience. They were his ideas about philosophy and these sort of things. But they were also kind of cheesy science fiction books. He wrote this series of books called the Illuminatus Trilogy, which details a lot of these different types of ideas. So here's a quote from Robert Anton Wilson on the number 23. On 23rd of July 1973, I had the impression that I was being contacted by some sort of advanced intellect from the system of the double star Sirius. You've heard of Sirius?
Yes.
I think it's the closest star to us.
Okay.
On 23rd July, ancient Egyptian priests began a series of rituals to Sirius, continuing until 8th of September. since Sirius is known as the dog star, being in the constellation Canis Major, the period 23rd July to the 8th of September became known as the dog days.
I've heard of that.
And we've heard of the dog days of summer before.
Yes.
On 23rd July 1976, using a battery of yogic and shamanic techniques, I opened myself to another blast of cosmic wisdom and told the transmitters that I wanted something objective this time around. The next week, Time magazine published a full-page review of Robert K. G. Temple's The Sirius Mystery, which claims that contact between Earth and Sirius occurred around 4500 BC in the Near East. The 23rd July festivals in Egypt were part of Temple's evidence. Another kind of pop culture way that 23 has like seeped into, one of the earliest sayings was this saying called 23 skidoo. You've heard that before?
I've heard that phrase, yes.
What do you think 23 skidoo means? Like if somebody said 23 skidoo, would you associate it with anything?
Well, skidoo usually means let's get going.
Right, like skedaddle.
Skedaddle, yeah.
So 23 skidoo was kind of like this, you know, a hashtag that became popular almost, or something like that early on, and it was printed on ribbons and buttons and towels at resorts and all sorts of things. And it simply meant to get going. And it was, or leave. It was also referred to earlier as if you referred to 23, I think now they call it 86th.
I know what that means, to get kicked out of a place.
86th. And 23 was also another term for that, to get 23'd. So 23 skidoo kind of has this association with being kicked out or separated from or removed from a place. There was also this building on 23rd Street in New York City, and it was on 23rd Street, and men supposedly would wait here to see women's skirts get blown up, like when they would walk around this corner, because there would be like wind blowing, and then they would be walking normally here. And the cops would like shoo them out of this area, and some people claim that this is how the term 23 or getting 23 or whatever came about, was from these cops that were kicking these men out of this area frequently. So have you ever heard of Discordianism?
I think you brought it up once.
Okay, so Discordianism is a paradigm based upon the book Principia Discordia, written by Greg Hill with Carrie Wendell Thornley in 1963. The two working under the pseudonyms Malaclips the Younger and Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst. According to self-proclaimed crackpot historian Adam Gorightly, Discordianism was founded primarily as a parody religion. Many outside observers still regard Discordianism as a parody religion, although some of its adherents may utilize it as a legitimate religion or as a metaphor for a governing philosophy. And with Discordianism, we see not a worship, but I don't know what you would classify it as, a profound interest in this goddess Eris, the goddess Eris, who's often associated with chaos. And so in Discordianism, they often say that chaos is integral to human experience itself. So they embrace chaos, and that opens them up to coincidences and these sort of things as well. Again, you can see there's the kind of something similar to what we were talking about last time too, is this crackpot historian angle as well, where it's like, is this a real thing, or is this fake, or is this become a real thing now? You know, since people are actually, you know, adhering to it in a certain type of way. So Eris is. Have you ever heard of the golden apple? In other instances.
Well, Atlanta and the gold. Yeah, there
I
are
don't
different.
know it. I mean, I just know.
There are myths about golden apples.
And what would your myth be referring to? If you saw a golden apple. So with Eris.
Yeah, go ahead.
With Eris, basically, she wrote Callisti.
I see that on there.
um, in Greek, and that would mean like to the fairest one.
To be beautiful. Kalon is beautiful.
Like the most beautiful can have this apple.
Yes. There's a Greek myth in
And then
which
she
Paris
would.
has to choose between these three goddesses, which is the most beautiful, and he gives the golden apple to
Right.
Venus, or one of those three.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so she like just rolls the golden apple into the into a wedding, and there's a wedding going on, and she just rolls this apple in just to create chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of looks back at what she did. So she's kind of like a Joker character in a way, a little bit, where she's just creating mayhem and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also what Discordianism would say is that it's kind of interesting. You were also talking about chords in dissonance,
yes. Mm-hmm.
and these sort of things. If there is some sort of dissonance as well within human experience, it's also been used in other pop culture stuff. This is like a Throbbing Gristle song about William Burroughs, and they have like the number 23 there, and they started using a lot of 23s in their production of their music. Of course, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes
yeah, that's a good one.
in our body.
That's a really important.
And we have 23 sex cells or whatever. And so we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, so 46. And then sex cells would be 23.
And that number 23 has become really established because of the ad for that ancestor
23andMe.
23andMe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, we might just forget that, but now that is getting burned into our brain.
Yeah.
Our genetic history and whether it's, go ahead.
The Quran was revealed in a total of 23 years to Prophet Muhammad. Also, Muslims believe that the first verses of the Quran were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad on the 23rd night of the 9th Islamic month.
Oh, there we go. We got a copy of that book here someplace.
The average, here's the crazy one. The average human physical biorhythm is 23 days, and the blood circulates the body an average of 23 seconds.
Wow.
The primitive divine alphabet and all the Torah also would base on a series of 23 letters.
Whoa, yes. That's a good reminder that there are 23 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. I still can't remember them.
John Forbes Nash, the American Nobel Prize winning mathematician, also the subject of a film called A Beautiful Mind, was obsessed with the number 23 as well. He believed that the number 23 has a unique role in human relationships for personal health and the life order.
Mm-hmm. Russell Crowe.
In Aleister Crowley's Kabbalistic dictionary, he defines the number 23 as the number of parting, removal, separation, joy, a thread, and life. The 23rd hexagram of the I Ching is translated as splitting apart.
Whoa. And we got a copy of that book around here someplace. Yes, I got it. Wow, that's pretty,
so.
I like that.
Synchronicity.
Okay, I know about synchronicity. Keep going.
So when we start thinking about 23 coming into our lives in different ways, we could also think of them as being synchronicities or meaningful events which occur.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, synchronicity is the concept first introduced by Carl Jung, which holds that events are meaningful coincidences if they occur with no causal relationship, yet seem to be meaningfully related.
Yes.
So we can start seeing how, now that you're aware of 23, you might start seeing 23. And I had just had a 23 a couple days ago when I found this little wizard. I found like a little wizard statue from my youth, like a little Dungeons
at the farm.
Like a Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sculpture, but a little miniature.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I should paint this again because it was all messed up. So I was painting it, and on the back it just says 23.
And this was what was the figure?
It was a little wizard.
Wizard, like a beard and
like a boy who was
Merlin,
a wizard.
Or that kind of wizard, yes.
And then another, right after I told Yana about this in 23, another really strange one was we were in front of the washing machine, and there was the tiniest little sticker on the floor, like fallen off a piece of clothing or something, and it just was a number 23 that had fallen on the floor that was stuck to our floor, like right after we started talking about it.
And you both went screaming and around the room.
So, finishing up,
Yes.
we have a lot of different type of biases as well. I just wanted to give that a little bit of credence, because this is a whole list of biases.
What do you biases? What do you mean?
So agent detection is the inclination to presume the purposeful intervention of a sentient or intelligent agent.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So we have all these different types of biases, which can also be kind of warping our brain a little bit. So perhaps 23 is just some sort of a confirmation bias, that once we see something, we're confirming it over and over again, and that's giving rise to the fact that we're creating our own realities. So.
Wow, or something like that.
Right.
There are plenty of things you experience all day long that don't create that wow feeling, and that's why he had to have a term for it.
Okay.
Now.
Okay. Right. The actual that sensation of or realization of, like, that's kind of weird.
Yes. That's why it's a meaningful coincidence. Just because, oh well, did you know that somebody? Well, there are plenty of things that somebody could say, well, that was a coincidence, but you didn't even notice it, didn't made. But once you notice it, it's your psychology that sees it. Okay, I'll say this quickly.
That's fine, we have time.
As you know, one of my current projects is to read poems written by people no older than my own children. And the most recent book that I ordered, and these are cheap on Amazon, like they're poetry books for $3 or $4 of them, is a book of poems written by Jennifer Chang. And it's called Some Say the Lark. And I was thinking, this is going to be the last one I'm going to order for a while. I'm just going to stop with this process. So I get it today, and I thought, oh, I'm just sort of look through it a little bit. And I'm going to look at the very first poem. And it's called A Horse Named Never. I'm noticing this big time, because we just went through
the horse girl.
A horse girl last night, and you're saying that women that do horses are crazy, and this is a young woman, Jennifer.
Well, it's generally assumed.
I know. I mean, just the very fact, a young woman, Jennifer Chang.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to read a portion just to get a sense of. You don't have to hear the whole thing, but here is a poem called A Horse Named Never, written by a young woman. And it's written in these very separate sections. At the stables, each stall was labeled with a name. We went through the stable over and over last night. In a movie about mental illness, perhaps, or what we're saying is that she really is being taken up, and I'm making the case over and over that's actually a happy ending, rather than just say, oh, she's crazy. Biscuit stood aloof. I faced always, invariably, his clockwork tail. Crab knew the salt lick too well. And then she goes through these, getting on a horse called Never, and riding it, and various things. So I'm thinking about horses from last night and the movie last night, and this little discussion about what's crazy and what's visionary and what's UFOs and this kind of crackpot history in science and who built the pyramids really, and so how can I when I see a horse named Never, my mind is already filled with this kind of, ready for this kind of thing, and yet she's a contemporary American poet. And then I find out later that these first two are horses that were listed as owned by Thomas Jefferson. And there was a poetry project in which different poets in America were asked to write a poem about Thomas Jefferson. And of course, they're dealing with these contemporary things about racism and all this kind of stuff. So her result is this one, Horse Named Never.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot going on here for her as a poet. But when it comes to women and girls, young women riding on horses, and after the horse girl last night and the issues that it raises, I'm noticing it. I'm noticing.
Do you think that's the universe trying to tell you something?
Well, what Jung would say is that it's proof that the universe is unus mundus. It's one world. There isn't a world for the physical and a world for the mind that are separate. They overlap and do things together.
That's pretty cool.
It is, and that right, and that's right. That's so something that happened, like you picked up that little wisdom object from your childhood,
Wizard. Yeah.
wizard, and as a grown man, and you think, oh, I'm an artist and I should paint this. I'm going to fix it up like you fixed the Francis and other things, and then you see, well, the number 23 is on there. Oh,
Why is
meaningful
it even
coincidence.
there?
Bang.
Like, why would they?
Your psyche noticed.
Yeah.
So the world of your psyche and the world of that lost wizard, which could have never been found ever,
Right.
got overlapped somehow. That's kind of cool. I mean, cool in the sense that, well, we can do whatever you want with it, but very good. I think it's no accident that Horse Girl dealt with these questions of in mental illness in the most normal sense. She's schizophrenic, we'd say, even though her caretakers are not incompetent, but they're not very effective. And yet there's a world of people who are interested in where the pyramids came from, like Darren and things, and he goes along with her. And yet, it's not a horror film.
I thought it was more terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying, but, and for what? And you have to think.
Well,
yes.
the real terror is
yes.
like losing control of time or something like that. Must just be complete terror.
And there are
like, have you ever had like my experience with the Suburban when we were driving down River Road? You know the story.
And you saw this creature.
Yeah.
Or you and Eric is his name?
Yes.
And
he's a responsible member of society.
He's in the psych ward now.
He's like the most credible witness I could possibly have of my friends. But we drove down the road. There was a Suburban stopped on the other lane coming towards us. The dome light in the Suburban was on. The door was left open in the Suburban. There was no human anywhere around the Suburban. We didn't see any human there. In front of the thing was this creature like this tall with gray kind of mangy fur, and like we drove up by and he was like and screamed at us, and we drove off.
Did you guys go
Yes.
And that's the end of the story.
Well,
did you do anything with that? Tell anybody? Or
yeah, we told everybody. Nobody believed us.
Of course not.
But I could literally take a lie detector test or go into hypnotherapy. I've been hypnotized also once. I got hypnotized. That was weird.
But well, she could have been hypnotized, and she said, "I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth." But so and we know that people who have schizophrenia are that's terrible suffering. Like you think you're suffering, and yet at the same time, there is a unus mundus, mysterious side to the world, and so, and you're making the point that there is a tradition of exploring 23.
What do you think about dissonance and discord?
Relating to music? Or
dissonance in the terms of the Schoenberg, what was it, 12-tone scale?
Atonal, no tonality, atonal, or 12-tone system.
So he purposely composed based on this, though.
Yes.
So it was a real system that worked. Like, you'd have to be smart. You can't just like throw a cat on the keyboard and be like, "That's my piece."
That would be something John Cage might do.
Okay.
Say it's fun. It's just fun to, like I've said, sometimes when the cat jumps on there and goes ba-dum, ba-dum, he's got a motif going in there that could be used in music somehow.
But Schoenberg was a real system.
Oh, yeah, very. In fact, it's quite intellectual. You know, because he's figuring out. I can't.
How stuff sounds wrong.
How does this?